We're back. Product inauguration, period of analysis. We just taking the market, taking the news.
It's boosting their lives. Huge change in the country politically. And Lincoln chose that occasion to say with malice towards none, with charity for all. Let us bind up our wounds. That's the kind of message that you need to have if you've had
We just saw again Joe Biden
a rough and tumble time, and especially when you've had
Capitol Hill is going to
such a severe war.
Inauguration.
The other two that I
of power.
really like are Franklin Roosevelt's 1933. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Of power.
Where he tried to calm the nation in the midst of this Great Depression.
United States Barack
and it was a really important message that calmed the fears in the country that, banks closing and things like that. It was a really difficult time. His message was one of fortitude and, bucking up the American people. And then my absolute favorite actually is JFK's 1961 inaugural, when he talked about, let the torch be passed to us, and then we need to be a country of service. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. It's a wonderful, beautiful speech, very well put together, beautifully delivered on a day not unlike today. It was about 22 degrees. You can see the breath. And Kennedy got up, no hat, no overcoat, and gave this very stirring speech.
A lot of people that are commenting on the Bitcoin.
Worth watching, and I think considered one of the top 2 or 3
buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, BTC.
Jim, I also wanted to ask too, because we are in 30 days of mourning as a country in the wake of the death of former President Carter. President Biden issuing the guidance and the order for all American flags on federal buildings to be lowered to half staff. But in the last couple of days, you've heard from Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. You've heard from some Republican governors like Greg Abbott, like Ron DeSantis, and others saying that for today, the American flag should be raised back to full staff on some state houses. That is going to happen, but we're learning, according to some reports, that Speaker Johnson also had ordered that for the U.S. Capitol. But some reports saying right now that the staff, the crew, are trying to bring it back to full staff, but the cords are frozen because it is so cold. I wanted to ask, though, was there a previous time when the nation was under a 30-day period of mourning for a former president or whatever, during the time of an inauguration? Can you think of one? Is that unique?
I think it is unique. If you look at our inaugurations, we today Trump will become the 47th POTUS, but we've had 78 different ceremonies because every consecutive POTUS, numbered POTUS, if you have 2, swearing in ceremonies, and we have this quirk of several presidents who died in office. And those presidents, there was an immediate transfer of power to the vice presidents in those situations. And, Nixon's resignation, the transfer to Gerald Ford. So when those presidents died in office, and you would have had, the flags at half-mast, the transfer of power had already happened. There was no real inaugural speech. There was no inaugural ceremony other than the giving of the oath to the vice presidents under these, dire circumstances. It was done in various places, by the way. It wasn't just in the Capitol. Calvin Coolidge, when he took over after Harding died, his father swore him in Vermont. And several times when that sort of thing happened, an emergency presidency, if you will, those would be followed by some public ceremony on the East Portico. So to answer your question, I don't think this has ever happened before where we've had the death of a former president or a president that resulted in flags being flown at half staff during an inauguration. It would have been during the time of emergency. LBJ down in Dallas, he was sworn in on Air Force One. Very interesting trivia question there. The person who swore LBJ in was Sarah Hughes, who was a federal district court judge who had been appointed by Kennedy and was a friend of LBJ's. He waited for her to come out. the only woman to ever administer the oath of office.
Wow.
And so you see that famous scene. What's really interesting to me, because I wrote in my book, January 1973, that she's the one who administered that oath. She was later the judge who decided Roe v. Wade in the lower court.
Wow.
On a Sky Sport, Sky News. So let's check it out. So everywhere, people from CNBC to Sky to ABC, all the news channel in the world, they are actually on a live of Trump inauguration. All right, we can see some movement. The convoy has now just started leaving. The convoy of Donald Trump. In fact, it's actually arriving on a Capitol Hill. Let's just go and see. All right. These are clear pictures in terms of the presidential convoy arriving at Arena. So the ceremony will be held inside the Capitol Rotunda. Capitol Rotunda. Inside the Capitol Rotunda. That's where the ceremony is going to be happening. All right. Maybe we can check some other CNBC to see how are they linking this inauguration.
Protesting in 2020
the market
really shows a real divide in our country through this mechanism of the pardon power. And it's definitely going to be the thing that we're going to remember. You know, it's interesting that, you know, the people who write these speeches for presidents spend a lot of time looking at the past inaugurals. And it is interesting to go back and look at them. They're real points in time. But if you look at some of the people who wrote their inaugurals before they had speechwriters per se, James Garfield in 1881, who was a college president, just a genius in math, Civil War general, and he won in 1881. He would then be assassinated 6 months later, but he could not, he had writer's block. He could not write it out, and he was going to write. But it's a really important historical document that sets the nation in a point in time, but it also looks back. Most of these inaugurals reference George Washington in some way or another. Most of them reference the founding fathers. Most of them, like President Reagan, reference the miracle of the transfer of power, the peaceful transfer of power in this country. And then, of course, they talk about where they are and what they want to do. They don't necessarily talk about, you know, down nitty-gritty policy. It's more principles of where they want to take the nation and what they want to do. And, you know, that was true of Trump's first inaugural. That was true of
so now we are
Biden's
seeing,
inaugural. This whole idea of
outgoing
talking about
vice
broad
president and the
principles
husband,
and
which
ways
is
that you
Kamala
want to lead
Harris,
the nation.
standing on the door.
So
In fact,
it's
welcome.
it's an important time, an important document, an important marker for our country, and it's worthwhile going back and reading a number of these inaugural addresses to really get a feel for how the country got through very difficult times, how the country got through very good times, and how we progressed and moved forward as a nation.
That's the picture.
And moving forward, we were just sharing with our viewers, Jim, more individuals leaving, departing St. John's Church. We were seeing Barron Trump, obviously the youngest son of President-elect Trump, along with a number of his other family members. And right here, we do see Vice President Kamala Harris and Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff welcoming Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. And so it does appear as though perhaps they're having a conversation. So I did want to raise the audio for our viewers to see what we can hear.
Great.
Vice President, the elected Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, and his wife. So both outgoing Vice President and incoming Vice President. That's the picture that we are seeing there. Kamala Harris going out, and again, Jimmy
The audio
Vance
just a little
coming
bit difficult to hear, but from what we saw with the exchange, Jim, what do you make of this? Obviously, it was an incredibly contentious election cycle, and neither individual really mincing words, or anyone for that matter. When we take a look at this exchange, again, history in the making, what do you glean from that?
So Vice President,
interesting to me.
We've
had very few
welcome the new Vice President and
senators become president. John Kennedy was one of them.
Inauguration.
Barack Obama was one, and Warren Harding was one. Very few people come out of the Senate and become president. A lot of them come from the House. A lot of them are governors like Reagan and Carter. But these two people, J.D. Vance and Kamala Harris, both come out of the Senate tradition, which is a very collegial fight, but then get along. There was grace there on both sides. And I think that that's an important message for the American people, that we can disagree vehemently about policies and about all sorts of things that are really important to us. But at the end of the day, just like those senators have to get along in their legislating for the American people, those two showed that they have Senate blood in them, so to speak, that they both are willing to be collegial and to speak to each other as human beings and as fellow politicians. So I was pleased to see that. I was pleased to see the smiles, and I think it's an important message for the American people.
And I also wanted to share, Jim.
Andrew Kraft here. So talking about their Senate careers, they weren't in the Senate for very long, Harris nor Vance at all. So they didn't necessarily get to, show maybe their legislative bona fides. They were really instantly catapulted.
They overlapped with each other. I don't think they did.
There is pure volatility. I think the connection is really, really bad today. I'm not sure why. Plus 100, still on a bullish movement. The anticipation is still the same to 21,696. S&P 500 still on a bullish movement. The anticipation is still the same, 6,061. German 30 gold again still ranging at 2,709. in anticipation to drop 2,690 a little bit. Again, we're still on a live sessions of Donald Trump inauguration. We saw a rand to a dollar depreciating all the way to 1858. It's coming from 1880 yesterday. So 1858, a little bit of drop of the percentage, but I'm not sure if this is the recovery of rand to a dollar. So we saw the rand gaining a little bit of strength than the dollar. Euro USD spike up, GBP USD spike up, all of them. Higher movement though against the dollar at the moment. I think the investors are all waiting for all these inauguration to start and to carry on to hear the speech from Donald Trump, and then we'll see some really, really interesting volatility. Right? Still on the live inauguration of Donald.
4 years, Jimmy Carter started the tradition with Mondale of bringing him into the Oval Office and giving him an office in the White House,
Capitol Rotunda,
and
an
consulting with him
arena where we're
regularly.
going to
And
see
that's been more or less
a lot of
true, but I think
ceremonies, a lot of speeches.
it'll be interesting to see. Donald
and
Trump
again,
is such
the
a dominant
inauguration is going to
leader,
be in a
and JD
White
Vance has so
House,
little
but
experience,
indoor in a
relatively
Capitol.
speaking. It'll be interesting to see how much he's included and what task he's given, by the president, or if he'll be less of an authority than in the past. So very interesting questions to come.
And it's interesting that you bring that up, Jim, because, talking about the role of the vice president during former President Jimmy Carter's funeral, we were hearing the words of the late former Vice President Mondale, and talking about the reason why he accepted was because he wanted the role of the vice president to be one that was respected, one that was more equal than in years past. And it is going to be interesting to see what that dynamic is like and what role JD Vance will play as we continue to take a look outside of Blair House. We are expecting President-elect Trump to depart momentarily. And on the lower right-hand side of your screen, that is an aerial view from inside the Capitol Rotunda, just a stunning view as we take a look. And previously, there were some singers. It does look like perhaps the ceremony, that portion of it has concluded as we do see people exit right there, but just sharing with our viewers the different vantage points as we continue to watch in real time the events unfold. But it is absolutely interesting to see the very beginning, almost, Jim and Andrew, of what is to come in the next 4 years, setting the stage for what is likely to be a very different presidency. And you were mentioning the dynamic and the role, couching that in historical
I think it's going to be the very, very long day.
Dynamics
so for
and
now,
relationships between
let's
former
stop it at the
presidents
moment. And again, we can
and their vice presidents. Andrew, it's definitely going to be interesting to see what unfolds.
Started.
Yeah.
Again, welcome to the Telemoney Markets.
That's so true. I just have to know, we do see Marine One there in front of the Capitol. That's always a very, very cool
listening to the
shot there. Maybe we could take that full. You see the presidential helicopter there in front of the U.S. Capitol.
Live
and
here
so
in Johannesburg.
we'll see who gets on that.